Today, we're joined by Blanca Bastos, the founder and managing director of Be Structural, a consultancy dedicated to connecting people, processes, and systems to drive sustainable growth and operational efficiency. With over 20 years of experience in business and technology projects across various industries, Blanca has a deep understanding of how to dissolve structural faults within organizations. Be Structural specifically specializes in business process management, process automation, and organizational transformation, helping companies achieve end-to-end visibility and continuous improvement. It's going to be an exciting conversation. Welcome, Blanca.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's a pleasure having you. So let's, as always with this podcast, start from the top. How did you get Be Structural started?
Yeah, how did I start? Yeah, that's a long journey. So my background is in computer science. I started computer science many, many years ago. When I started as a professional in that area, I was more oriented to data. At that time, we were having like the new concepts of data warehousing, business intelligence, all that type of concepts. And many things ended up in that space, like lack of data, many problems, business trying to do something, but not knowing how to do it because they didn't have the data, or even when they wanted to change anything, any application or any process, there was always a lot of struggles. So with the time, I definitely used to love data and I used to do a lot of work in that area. But I still realized there were other problems. There were always problems, especially lack of communications between business and technology. Technology has changed a lot, as we know, but also people in technology have changed a lot. But the communication has always, or at that time, was even more difficult than it is now, because nowadays we have more user-friendly technology. It is more accessible to people, but at that time it wasn't. So then I continued investigating and I understood there is a structural fault, what I called a structural fault in most organizations. Because I used to work in different industries, government organizations, private, medium size, large organizations. And it was that common factor that there is a disconnection between people, processes, and systems. And it sounds a little bit like repetitive. We have heard about people, processes, and systems many, many, many times for many, many years. And sometimes I don't think we understand exactly what it means when we go to the practical side of it. So I realized after so many projects, working in so many different projects in business and in technology, that there is that disconnection. And the disconnection I consider is mainly, there are different factors, but mainly is because most of processes are always in people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
We rely too much in our memory. We rely too much in our capacity to do our work, which is fine because I consider most people do a good job. Most people want to shine. Most people want to be rewarded, recognized at work. So it's more about knowing what to do when we talk about processes. So when we talk about processes, we think about just process steps and a flow. So we think something a little bit basic, but it's beyond that. So for many years working in different projects, I realized that gap needed to be bridged. And this is how I started. I started because I thought it was a time for me to jump from being a freelancer to build my own company and applying what I actually teach to my own company. So I started with that big desire, or from that big desire of organizing and structuring things, because that's what I'm good at. So this is how basically I started. So I jumped from working in different projects and being focused only on my job to become a business owner where I have to understand the whole thing end to end.
Right. So what does it entail to actually jump into a business and start to understand what is essentially the complexity of their fulfillment system, or however they have things set up.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I always think about is like a company or a business is like a person. It's the same, not the same. Let me
Similar.
correct
Yeah.
myself. It's similar. We can compare, right? We can
Yeah.
compare. It's not the same, but it's similar. So we have different stages in our lives. We can be kids, and then we are teenagers and adults, and we have a very similar path. We follow very similar paths in our lives. Of course, we are impacted by culture, gender, age, or many other factors, but we have a similar path. With companies, it's similar as well. How you start a company is never easy. Starting is very, very difficult. I think in most cases, unless you have a lot of money and then you can invest, and you have everything there available, which is probably not the rule, but the exception. So then most of the time we dream about having a company and thinking that when I have my own company, so then I don't have a boss, and then I'm a little bit more independent, and I'm gonna be happier, or I will have more time for myself. And we think many things, but the way that I have experienced is like it's actually the other way around, right? The only way to grow a company or for your company to grow is from you growing. So your company says a lot about yourself, and what you offer is something that you have to check really well, because probably it's something that is lacking in you deep inside, or is something that you're good at, but there are other aspects of the company that you are not great at, etc. So forming a company is as difficult as I think many people know. But if we, during the process, we have joy, we have growth, and we have a real desire of doing it, definitely it makes it a little bit easier.
Right. So I guess that's a qualitative analysis of what it takes to create systems and to continue creating a business that improves their systems over time. So I'm wondering if you can actually give us a quick success story for Be Structural on where you made an impact on a client's operations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I will give you an example of a company. I'm not going to give names, but there is a company in the construction industry where they have a lot of processes, or they had a lot of processes manually. It's starting from the moment that they still had paper. They still had sending PDF to clients for them to print, fill in, sign in, scan, and email back. That is a very, very, very dangerous thing to do nowadays. It's very inefficient, and they were losing definitely a lot of money. They were also facing a lot of turnover in staff in the company. People were really tired of calls from customers and all that it takes. Now, when we started to talk about processes, they were reluctant to do that. I remember one of the C-level people there saying, we don't want to be dictated by processes. That's not what we want. We just want a system face to the customer for them to do automatic things. Yes, that's the end goal, to automate certain tasks, especially when you're facing the customer. However, if you don't understand where the failures come from, it's going to be very difficult. If you don't have the recipe of the food that you want to prepare written down somewhere, and if you take time again to make that delicious dish, you will have to, most likely the recipe is not going to be the same when you try to do it. Something is going to lack because you will forget the amount of ingredients and many other things, other steps. So it's the same with your processes. Even if you know them very well, there is a moment when you will forget things. So for them, they use that word. We don't want to be dictated by a process. So I asked them, what does it mean to be dictated by a process? So does it mean that you guys are not following processes? So they say, yeah, of course we're following processes, but we don't want to be dictated. We don't want to be rigid in the way we do something. So I say the problem, the lack of problem here is not that it's rigid. The problem is not modeled, it's not documented, and it's not managed. There is no process intelligence behind your processes. I ask them, if I ask you right now, the time that you invest in each of those forms flowing from end to end, if I ask you right now, in the staff involved in these processes, if you know exactly what processes each of your staff is involved in, do you have that data? And they say no. So this is when our journey started with training. So training is always important, and training, it could be formal or not. We can do formal training when we talk about processes, when we talk about a particular BPM tool that we're going to use, etc. But also training is about that organizational change, which is implicit when we are doing the exercise of modeling. So even that they were reluctant, but at the same time they needed something. The problem is they didn't know exactly what they needed. And that happens a lot when we're talking about structuring people, processes, and systems. It happens a lot. They understand the consequences, but they don't know where that comes from. So we started by training, by getting a lot of people involved, step by step, completely at the beginning, etc., etc. And then after some time, they started to speak the language. They started to understand what a level 4 is when we're talking about the process architecture, what the content is, how to generate the content. So it was a journey of them getting trained in what it is at the same time that we were modeling their processes and also generating reports for them to decide what processes they wanted to automate, how to automate them, etc. So they ended up, and we were together with another company that were in charge of creating and improving the website, in all of that part. That's not our part. We worked together, and they ended up forming a group. That was our recommendation, to have a BPM group. They have 3 people only, but they are good. They are well trained to maintain the processes. So this is a very successful story, not only because they achieved having some process automated, but also because their people are now trained in that. And although it's not perfect, they have a lot of process-based management in their company.
Right. So, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, it sounds like it was really transformative because on multiple fronts, you're both improving the processes, removing a lot of the inefficiencies, but also training the people on, their people and creating an entirely new unit to make sure that the processes get continually updated and managed and get more efficient over time. So it's like a constant and never ending improvement of the systems once installed. So I'm wondering, okay, what sort of like structural faults do organizations tend to have before you jump in and start doing this type of work? And then thereafter, like, do you have a very specific methodology that you install into organizations? Does that same methodology work for everybody? I know there's 3 questions there, but I'm just wondering, like, really curious right now.
Yeah, definitely. So where we start by doing a diagnosis of where they are in something that we call, and it's not, it's not only in the structural, this is something known, which is what is called BPM maturity level, business process management maturity level. That, we use 5 levels from basic to continuous improvement level. And there are different ways to call it. So we start with a set of questions that we have to understand where they are at that maturity level. It could be that they have no processes documented at all. They don't even have conscious of the importance of documenting processes. Or it could be that they are conscious about processes. Some of the processes could be actually done repetitive somehow. So there are different levels. So depending where they are after, sometimes depends on the size of the company, that could take a month of work from us just to determine that, doing workshops with different people, key people. We try to involve as many people as possible because sometimes we forget the people who are actually doing the work. And sometimes some management believe this is how we do things, and then the people doing the job say this is not how we do things. So then we try to get as much people involved as possible. So then that's the first step. We do that, right? So then we explain to them the levels of maturity, and then we ask them, where do you want to go from here? Which level do you think is the level that you can achieve? And again, all of that require educational. It's an educational process, as I said, formal or not, is educational. Then they decide what is the next step, what to do. So we usually recommend our best approach is to do top-down approach, but it's not always the case. Sometimes, depending on the size of the company, they start from a unit, and then we go like bottom up, mapping whatever we can, and then see where that goes into the whole process architecture. We have to do a lot of work when we're doing the diagnosis, because we have to understand also if they have a strategy in place, if they have business architecture in place, if they have enterprise architecture in place. So it's a lot of things depending on them. And that's what is the maturity level that we are measuring. Then after that, when they decide, so then we start to design the next step, usually between 3 and 6 months. So we start to model, and we start with the process architecture if they don't have any, based on the business capabilities, etc., etc. And then from that, we define, process high level. As I said, is the recommendation. And then we start to model processes with them. And at the same time, we generate reports to understand what processes are candidates for automation, etc., etc. So the method is about following diagnosis, then deciding what to do, modeling, training, and then defining the continuous improvement for themselves, right? We always recommend anytime we can jump again and do consultation for them, but we recommend that they get self-sufficient and then train some people, as I said, to form a BPM group. So it's all of those steps, but it varies according to where they are at and where they want to be. I don't know if I answered all the questions.
You did. You answered the majority of them. I think, if anything, to follow up, so you have this diagnosis and creation process, right? And you're looking at all of the real stakeholders in a process and making sure nobody gets sidelined simply because of seniority, which is, one of the larger issue that most people tend to believe. I'm wondering what the most common structural faults are, though, for organizations. Like, do they, I guess, like you said earlier in this conversation, they don't have anything processed, or maybe they overlook the people who are actually doing the work. But maybe it's more like architectural inside the business, more structural, where they actually have business and sales not talking to each other, or that client acquisition system not speaking to the back end fulfillment system, or whatever it might be. What tends to be like the most common structural issues that or faults that you see inside of businesses?
Yeah, that's a very good question. All of the above, the ones that you already mentioned. But the thing is, most of the times when we talk about a problem, we don't go deeper enough. We don't break it down enough to see where the
Really?
problem comes from. We usually have the tendency to think about consequences of the problem. Like, for example, this system is not working. That's a very general statement, and it's true. It's not working. So there are things in the system that are not working, but we have to go deep inside and see, is it the system? Is it the process? Is it part of the system? What is not working? So we have to go deep and deep. And one of the things that they don't do is that it's always that idea of quick wins. That quick win sometimes is, I understand the quick wins. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes when it's quick, it's not a win. It's
Right.
usually not a win. And sometimes a little bit not a win. But it's always about money. Again, I can't underestimate money. First, I love money and we need money, and many things are about money. But when we focus on the consequence of a problem and not the actual root, and still when we think that's the root of the problem, we have to go deeper. That lack of time and analysis for many companies is a very structural fault that I have found in many companies, in many industries, and wherever I've been. is that insistence of going quick, trying to do everything in projects, trying to solve certain problems just by adding a new system. People tend to have systems and then they start to create the most used tool in any company, Excel,
Right.
just to try to understand what is happening within the system, right? You can see that in many cases, in many companies, I have seen many meetings. People complain about meetings all the time. I don't have time to do my work because I had back-to-back meetings today, the whole day. I understand that it's terrible. And the problem is because people don't have the processes documented, they recreate the processes all over and over in each meeting. That's very expensive. They don't know it, but it's very expensive. We talk about something that we talked a week ago, but because it's not documented anywhere, we still need to understand it. We need to talk about again. Oh, you told me that to get these numbers, we need to go to this system. Is that correct? I don't remember. And then people have to repeat themselves. Well, yes, you have to go to that system and also you have to talk to this person. That's a process that is not documented somewhere, and they are trying to recreate the process or different process. Having that process management or process-based management mindset in a company is very common, and that's structure of.
Okay, so it's that actually is very accurate according to what I've seen as well, because I'm doing growth partnerships and I'm looking at businesses to acquire, and I'm seeing that time and time again. Some have maybe one core process mapped and outlined, but then they always blame the system instead of almost always themselves for not improving a certain part or not looking at their own management approach or whatever it might be. So I that sounds accurate to me. I'm wondering too, considering like we're in a current era of AIifying everything, throwing AI at and anything that moves, right? I'm wondering how, according to your experience, how some businesses are approaching the technology behind a process. Do they tend to think that a technology will solve all their problems instead of looking at the actual steps in the system?
Yes, definitely. People ask when you talk about anything, technology, they will always ask, do you apply AI there? Or how is AI impacting this? It's very common nowadays. And AI definitely is there and it's not going anywhere. And it's very useful. Definitely, I think it is. But if we think about AI, artificial intelligence, so we have to say it's intelligence, first of all. We're talking about intelligence. Intelligence is a characteristic, particularly of people. Now, it's artificial. Where that intelligence is coming from? From people, right? There is no other way to do it. It's coming from people. When we use for our personal things, like creating content or asking a question, nowadays we are not asking, like you're not asking your friend, you go to one of any of the AI tools and ask questions. Oh, I don't remember what is the capital of this country. And you go straight away, right? And you can ask little things and you can ask big things like create content or, many things, videos and all. But if you go to the tool and you don't have the foundation of what you want to get, you're not going to get it. Right. You're not going to get. Imagine that you say, I want to write a book using one of the AI tools. You could even ask, write a book about something that you like, and then you put your name, right? But that's not going to work. Nobody's going to recognize you if somebody interviews you about a book. You have no clue about the book. But if you go and say, like, you want to talk about, let's say, processes, and you want to use AI to help you with writing a book, you can, right? Because you can at least see if what is written makes sense or not. Maybe you learn a couple of things, but if you don't have that foundation, it doesn't work. So with processes, it's the same. Some technology is already in place for BPM tools to be more intuitive. and create a process based on what people are describing, etc. But most of the times, people can't describe a process properly, especially people who perform the process are the, how can I say that? They are the least ones to explain the process properly unless someone who is an expert in writing processes can ask the right questions. I'll give you a silly example because this is a silly example that I always use.
Okay.
You know, your mom, your grandma, whoever prepares a delicious food for you, and you love that dish, and then you say, I'm going to prepare that dish. And then you go and ask him, okay, how do you do this? What is the typical thing? This is easy. This is easy. You just put a little bit of salt, you put a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Nobody can replicate that with a little bit of salt and a little bit of that. No one, right? So a process is the same. Ask someone who is an expert at doing something to describe step by step. They will forget a lot of steps because it's already in them. It's like doing something that you do every day. You will forget certain things because for you it's automatic. So when we are modeling processes, we have to know how to map processes. I'm not an expert at that process. It could be something really that I have no idea how to do, but I will ask the right questions for them to give me what I want. And that's a difficult part when we are modeling processes. So then if you use AI will come up with whatever they think it is. And because the person is not an expert at modeling processes, they will say, yeah, that's what it is.
Right.
So it's
Exactly.
dangerous.
It can be. It can be. It's like a crutch in a lot of ways, and it doesn't actually fix the underlying issues and the thought processes that ultimately culminate in business processes. So I'm wondering those questions that you asked. What questions can founders ask themselves while they're trying to map out their own processes to identify when they need somebody like you to jump in or how to essentially fix something before it breaks the entire business?
Yeah. So first, when we talk about processes, many people think it's a list of tasks, right? They think it's a list. Okay, I first log in the system, and I secondly download this form and whatever it is, right? But when we are trying to model, we have to understand how those tasks interact with other tasks. We need to understand as well the sequence, the exact sequence, and all the process roles. I mean, all the performers or the actors within the process, how they interact, what comes first. Is it really this comes first than the other task, or is in parallel? Or what about the scenarios? Like sometimes people don't have the scenarios clear. They just mention a couple of them. The difference is like if I'm going to do like a program for a software and I put that program into the system, it has to be exact. Otherwise it doesn't go, right? I have to show every path possible because if the machine is trying to read a variable and it doesn't find the value to assign to that variable, it explodes. When we are talking about processes, you're just documented. Nothing is going to explode. But if I think on the potential scenarios, because I know that if there is a variable without a value, when somebody comes to that scenario, they don't know what to do. So there are questions about that people wouldn't ask themselves because they are not experts at that. They're experts at something else, finance or HR or whatever they are. Imagine trying a doctor to map their own process. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's why asking the question as, especially from someone who doesn't know the process, is important because you will ask everything that you don't know. And if I understand that process at the end, anyone will.
Got it. Okay. So it seems like a process isn't as simple as a linear step-by-step checklist, right? So when founders are looking through their processes to try to understand how to better improve them, they have to look at scenarios, at parallelized tasks, at how one step feeds into the other, and potentially even like error handling, similar to how you would in software, but understanding that it's people at the end of the day. So how do people error handle themselves? And then maybe, I guess, maybe taking this a step further, it's like, okay, well, what sort of resources, what sort of additional um, guidance can be given at certain parts of the process, and then they can continue that process without higher up like intervention. I'm wondering. So, in terms of like process automation and installing a process, I can imagine that changing the way that a company does something can be really difficult to change. So you can ask all the right questions, think of all these scenarios, and even try to train them. But what sort of obstacles do you tend to face whenever you're trying to actually get people to change their habits, change the way they do things?
It's very difficult, especially if you start a journey of BPM as a project, the probability to fail is high because a project's already in your mind. What is a project? Something that will finish sometime, right? If I say a project to get this form automated, that project, it will finish, right? And when I finish the project, I'm going to hand over the results to someone else and I'm free. So that's a project. Processes is part of the structure of the company. It's continuous. I mean, the most important part of the processes is to make it continuous. And that's the difficult part. So it doesn't work all the time, like, but especially when the company is quite big. And if they didn't grow structurally with processes in place, it's actually difficult. And then you have to do it function by function. And while doing that, when you implement something here and then you have to go and implement somewhere else, this part gets a little bit like not maintained properly.
Right.
So that's why the most important thing about BPM is understanding the concept, understanding what is behind, and that takes time. If in the company, it's like, for example, when you are building your business, you know that you will need accounting. Somehow you will need either an accountant, a set of them, or you will need software. Nobody questions, is going to give me some profits when I do accounting? No. You have to have certain legal parts. You have to create contracts. Nobody's asking. I'm not going to hire a lawyer because that's not going to bring me profit. Nobody does that. But when you want to implement BPM, everybody wants to understand straight away how they're going to recover the money that they are investing. Yes, I understand. If you don't have money, you cannot do it. But at the same time, it shouldn't be that arguable that it has to be from the very beginning showing you numbers because it's about the whole company. And eventually, of course, you will see the productivity. Just producing so many meetings to recreate processes again and again. Just even if we don't calculate that, there is increase in productivity and reduction in cost and effort just by default, right? So then you gain time from people who were busy in back-to-back meetings doing something more strategic for the company. So definitely you will recover or you will recover the money eventually, but not only that, you will have something working better. Do everybody understand that? What happens is, since from the moment that you arrive into a company that as an employee, there is a way to work here. Even if you are not good at that, either you adapt to that or you go, and it will happen naturally. For example, if I go to a company and the first week, the first 2 weeks, I don't even have a computer, right? And it happens in big companies, small companies, medium companies. Then we start with the wrong mindset. Like if I don't have a computer, maybe I can leave early, or maybe I can not go to the meeting because I don't have a computer. You see how the mindset starts to be terrible. But if I go to a company, I have everything that I need. I have the computer. My name is in the system. I have my email address is work, right? And then people tell me, okay, this is your in your intranet. When you click here, you're gonna see the processes that we have, and you will see where you are at in the processes. And then these are your processes. Uh-oh. Right? If I go to a meeting, I need to be ready to say what I, like what processes I am involved in, and I'm more prepared, and not only more prepared, but also I'm alert. Everybody's going to be saying the processes. I'm going to be behind. So it depends on very, very important details from the very beginning.
Right. And you can correlate a lot of these details with some of the holes in like general business finances or general business efficiency. So let me actually dive in a bit deeper there. There's a statistic that says generally it 50% of new hires don't work out, right? Either because they don't perform or because they end up leaving, right? So then how much of that can be actually be attributed to faulty systems or inefficient systems? 50% of new hires for, let's say, for example, for my growth partnership, we do like 14 different marketing and sales roles all in one. In order to hire for all of those people, it would cost like 423 hours total to hire those people, right? So you can imagine that if a company is actually going out hiring an entire marketing team, 423 hours invested, and then 50% of those people don't work out, and then the sum total of their salaries is like $1.2 million worth, you're not just losing around $600,000, you're also losing around 200 hours of work that could have gone into more fruitful things. So the idea of, high performing, well put together processes that help new employees ramp up within 90 days, arguably within 7 days, if they can hit the ground running and then be impactful within the first 24 hours. When I was an engineer, that was one of our, like my own personal KPI whenever I entered a new team. And that is one of those KPIs where that differentiates you in the eyes of the management, in the eyes of the organization, and for yourself and your own capacity. So it's like, if you don't have the right systems, it sounds to me, you can't get any of that done. And you end up wasting a lot of money. So I'm wondering, okay, when you're talking to people who are considering updating their systems, or for people out there who aren't yet, in the know of how important it is to have efficient and productive systems, what sort of conversations do you have to have with them in order to convince them? Is there a lot of education that happens up front before you ever sign them as a client and jump in?
Exactly. You're totally right. And you got it perfectly right? You already calculated, right? By your own experience, you already calculated the time and the money that you spend to hire people. And if 50% of that people don't work, so then you already calculated, right? So now, do C-level executives have the time to have all of these conversations? Most of the times they don't. Most of the times they don't. And most of the times they don't even want to have the conversation. And I understand, because they have a high level view. They don't want to get involved into a lot of detail as we are doing in this conversation. So then what we try to do is to offer training, like training. In this case is informative. In this case is like 20-minute presentation talking about those examples, right? And sometimes we have to go deep into detail. What I have learned through experience is like when you coach into something very simple, and even that is not company, as I put the example of the recipe, or people, I think they capture something. They just match between processes and normal life. And processes is not something separate somewhere in a system that nobody's going to do anything about. They can see that processes is everything we do since we wake up in the morning. It's not just something that is very far from us. So trying to get their attention for some 15, 20 minutes in a presentation, which is informative. Of course, talking about numbers as the one that you mentioned. And then sometimes we use as well numbers with meetings, right? We say we have 10 people in the meeting. Each person is, I don't know how much per hour. just in an hour how much money you are investing in that meeting. It seems that it's part of work, but it's a lot of money involved in meetings, more than we believe. So we have to use that type of examples for them to catch it. And it takes time. It takes time. It doesn't go straight away. Like, oh yes, we want processes. Like usually nobody wants processes. Usually it's not something that people feel so attracted to, right? It's like going to the dentist. It's not that, yes, I want to go to the dentist. No, it's you have to go to the dentist, right? So there are certain things in life that we have to do, even if we don't want to, or even if we are not really happy to do. It's our own, it's for our own good, for our own benefit, so it
Right.
takes time with people.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Who tends to be your best clients?
Who is people, clients who are willing to grow strategically. People who like to have standards like Big Four, ISO standards, and that type of people care about the way they are growing. So in terms of size, medium to large, and I count more the number of employees in a company rather than the revenue, because there are companies with big revenue. They wouldn't embark into processes just because they have a lot of money and they don't really want that. So then I count more number of people, number of staff. When you have your company, the company is growing. At the very beginning is you with another 3, 4 people. You know exactly what you do. You all know what you do. You know what your staff does. But when you have 30, 40 people already, then you lose visibility. This is the moment when, if you haven't started, it's a good time to start. It's a very good moment to start. So the ideal client is that medium to large, and they want to grow strategically.
There it is. Okay, now it's unmuted. So growing strategically, medium to large. So what sort of teams do you like to start with when it comes to like onboarding a new client, or do they already have a target point inside their processes that they want to talk to you about?
It varies because sometimes there are companies that they have continuous improvement in place. So they are interested in understanding more about processes. Those customers are usually good customers. There are other cases when it's IT, when they are doing digital transformation and they notice they learn. Sometimes with IT companies it's a little bit difficult because they start a little bit late. So they make all decisions, they make all decisions, they plan everything, and suddenly they want to what they call map processes just for that purpose. So sometimes those are a little bit tricky because we have to explain what we actually do and why we do it, right? We help them as well. And sometimes if they don't want to, let's say, acquire the tool, a BPM tool, we can use the tools that we use and then just give them the results of the processes. If it's only for the purpose of designing the solution rather than actually managing the processes. So we can do that as well. So it varies. Sometimes it's finance because they want to actually change the finance processes. So then they just see it as a finance thing. Yeah. So it depends on the company. It varies.
Got it. So it varies, but ultimately you start with the client, you show them essentially how much better things can be with new processes, and then you tend to expand from there.
Correct. Correct. And sometimes we even start with analysis, not even processes yet. For example, we have worked in companies where we have to do analysis in certain things for designing solutions because we also offer those services because that's the beginning or the entrance to actually for people to understand processes. Because as I said before, it's not like people are ready to do processes. It's not like, oh yes, please come and help me with processes. Usually that's not how it starts. It starts with a lack of something, a problem that they need to solve. So then we offer business analysis and that type of services. So then from that, when we are helping them to analyze uh, the problem and to find a solution, we also tell them about the importance of processes and we educate them and they decide if they want to do it or not.
So in terms of like your own marketing and sales processes, like what sort of systems do you have in place right now?
Well, that's a very good question because there is a lot of improvement areas in our marketing and sales processes at the moment. So we actually working right now, starting to work with an external company who are helping us with that. We are planning, like I particularly planning to finish a book that I started to write last year and haven't finished. So I'm
Good.
planning, I don't want to promise date, but I want to finish this year, sometime this year. And I think it's going to be important to understand processes from a different perspective of the typical process, right? Like the typical technical or business side, it goes as well with your internal process of growth.
Interesting.
So that's one of the things that I individually planning to do. And so definitely, I consider we need to generate more content. That we have to do that in our process, and definitely continue building a network of referral partners. And so we have to do a lot of things in that process, actually.
Got it. So, I mean, amazing that you're going in that direction. Amazing that you have a book that's about to get released. So, you said internal processes. So, a couple times in this conversation, you mentioned that sometimes the processes that there are in a business are a reflection of you and where you are, and you sometimes are actually the bottleneck of whatever's happening inside the business. So, to use your words, there's the root, and then there's what's even deeper than the root, right? I'm wondering
Yeah.
the book, how does it dive into that? What's like the idea behind it?
Yeah. Actually, the name of the book is the process of growth, and it talks about that if you don't grow, your company doesn't grow. Right? That's the most important thing to talk about. And I tell stories about normal life, where when you analyze conversations, sometimes you analyze conversations between two people, for example, you notice so many things that the people who are actually talking don't even notice. That
Really?
is fascinating. And all the decisions that we make without even listening to ourselves, right? So one of the important things to learn from that book is like what we think, what we say, what we feel, and what we do have to be aligned. And most of the times they are not aligned. All of those things are not aligned. It's our nature. It's our human nature. We think something, we say something else. We say something, but we feel something different. And then we really don't even do what we say we're going to do, or we do something completely different. I think that's a very common situation for people in general, right? We say, well, I'm going to do exercises. And then 2 years later, you haven't even started. Or so many things. And they are little, or they look, or they appear to be little, but they are very important. So in that book is about understanding how our life is a whole process and how a company could be compared to a person, right? So if I say that what I think, what I say, what I feel, and what I do have to be aligned, that could be translated into a company. So what I think, what I want, what I think that I want to do as a business owner or as a leader, because it could be a company that is 20 years in operations already. There are always opportunities for improvement. So what I think, what I want to do, what I say, which is my strategy. What is my strategy? This is what I say I'm going to do. How I feel about the strategy. Do I feel that that's just going to be a document stored somewhere, or I'm actually going to do it? I'm actually doing something to execute my strategy, right? So it's very similar. It's comparable that in a company we start on a project. I don't know if you have seen that there is always a picture like a horse, and then I don't know if you have seen that one. It's very typical. There is like the picture of a horse, but at the beginning is perfect horse, and then it start to look like if a kid is actually drawing that. Have you seen
Yeah.
that? Very very common to describe projects, because you start the project and you say we're going to do this and that, and suddenly you spend all the money and you are not even halfway.
Mhm.
It's because we are not aligned in what we think, what we say, what we feel, and what we do. So that's a little bit of what the book is all about.
So you're diving into the alignment, personal alignment that ends up becoming the actual produced result to a certain extent. And are you connecting it back into the processes that people have inside their business? Or is this just
Not both.
personal?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit about checking your own life, checking yourself and your growth, where you want to go and how that translates into your business. As a business owner or as a leader in your business, how the way that you live your life reflects into your company. And why, if you're expecting your company to grow without you growing, that's not going to happen. And also what in fact means to grow. Is it just about aging? Is it just about achieving more things? Or is it about going beyond your automatic self? So this is a little bit of what I'm talking about in the book.
Interesting. Interesting. What does growth mean to you?
Growth means to always go beyond my automatic self. What does it mean? We all create a personality. We all have what we call personality, right? I am strong, or I am weak, or I am intelligent, or I'm a little bit this or that. So we all have that. And there is a part of that is kind of easy for us. Some people are good at exercises. So for them, running or doing something is very easy. For some others, analyzing is natural, right? But there is always some other factors that we struggle to actually master, even if we want to. So going beyond that, because growth, it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. Like the fact that for me, growth is like to make my business successful. It doesn't mean for someone else they have to have a business. No, they could be an employee the rest of their life and it's still growing, because it's nothing to do with that. It's growth is going beyond yourself, what you are used to do, what you are good at. It's going beyond there. It's like growth is like an espiral. I don't know how to say that word, espiral.
Right.
You know that?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's because everything goes like that in espiral, but it's going wider and higher. So this is what growth is.
Interesting. Interesting. So, I mean, we're almost 30 minutes beyond time right now, but I could ask you questions all day, it seems like. Well, I guess last two questions. What are you doing right now to grow?
What I am doing right now to grow, that's a very good question. Actually, improving everything in my business is something that is part of my growth. But what I'm doing is every time that I speak, that I say something, I try my best to listen to what I say, not to what I think I said, but to actually what I said. That's a very difficult exercise because we are not trained to listen to ourselves when we are talking. Right? So we call active listening. It's not just active listening. It's about actually listening to what you say instead of what you think you said. So for me, it's checking myself every time that something happens to me, especially if it's something that annoys me. It's about stopping, and instead of blaming that person, it's about seeing that person as a mirror and saying of that, because it's not automatic. It's not like if you are rude to me and I get impacted, I'm automatically rude. It doesn't work that way. It's why your rudeness is impacting me. I have to check that, right? What I do about you, if I talk to you again or not, that's a different story. But what is someone showing about me? And that happens when it impacts you, when it annoys you somehow. So I'm trying my best to do things that I'm not used to do. Like in the past, waking up early for me was really difficult. And there's something as silly as it sounds, it could be very challenging for someone.
Can be, yeah.
Improving my health in terms of what I eat, all of that is growth for me.
Good, good. I'm glad. So, right, last question here. What is something that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you would like to tell the audience?
That's good. That's a good one. Well, let me think. That's not something that I have in mind. But when I talk about be structural or something structural, probably everybody understands what that is, but maybe not. So something that I consider structural and why I talk about structuring the people, processes, and systems is if we want to assess if something is structural or not, let's say within a business in this case. It could be within a person, but within a business. What is structural, right? It's something that if I impact, everything else is impacted, right? It's like in your body. If you impact your cells, everything else is impacted. So probably your hair, if I cut my hair, that's not structural. But if my DNA is impacted, that's a structure, right? In a building, if a door is broken within the apartment, that's not structural. But if base, a column is impacted, that's structural. So in the business, people, processes, and systems are structural. If you impact your people, you impact the whole company. If you impact your systems, you do as well. And if you impact your processes as well. So that's why, looking at the structural way of connecting people, processes, and systems is absolutely fundamental for success in business. That's
Right.
probably one of the questions.
Agreed. It makes you an exponential entrepreneur in a lot of ways. One action turns into a multiplied effect. Understood and agreed.
Something that you do that,
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
impacts everything else.
Amazing. Well, Blanca, I really appreciate your time today. It seemed to have been a great conversation because we're an hour in. And hopefully it's the first of many.
Exactly. Hopefully that wasn't the last question. That was the last question for today.
Exactly. If anything in the future, would love to have you back on to talk more about the book once it's actually out and released.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good idea. And that makes me commit more to finalize it. And
Yes.
I really appreciate the time. Your questions are amazing, by the way, and your podcast that I have checked as well. So congratulations on this. I think it's an important work, the work that you do to inform an audience and to give opportunity to business owners as well to express themselves. So thank you for that, Joe.
Yeah, of course. It's our pleasure, truly, to give you all the platform. So until next time, thanks, Blanca. Thanks, everybody, for
Until
listening.
next time. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye bye.